Hello everyone and welcome back to another Hovelax Dev Diary. Today we're going to be looking at the Officer Corps's changes in what is a relatively shorter dev diary, but I thought there were some interesting things we could pick up on. So we begin by looking straight at the image of what the new Officer Corps button and menu does. So it's going to be a conglomeration of lots of pre-existing systems, including Military High Command, commanders themselves, doctrines, and other things relating to doctrines as well. So let's break this image down bit by bit. The empty advisor portraits at the top of the window are where you can now find your high command and military theorists. This means they've been moved out of the sub-political branch when you click on your country, which means there's probably going to be a big empty space where military staff used to be, meaning there's only two tabs left, Laws and Government and Research and Production. Maybe they're going to add some other stuff there in future, maybe it's going to be empty, who knows. We can also see in this image that the Chief of Army, Navy and the Air Force also have their slots assigned to this menu in each respective tab, Army Command, Navy Command and Air Force Command. The dev diary goes on to say that in addition to the UI location changing, the military advisors are all going to give Army experience gain now, which was different from before where only the theorists gave Army experience, meaning you can pick an infantry expert or an anti-submarine specialist and they will respectively give you Army XP relevant to that specific branch, so Army, Navy or Air Force. As an important aside, they do mention that the advisor's rank, in this case expert, does increase the amount of Army experience gain you get from them. In addition, we can see that the cost of the advisors has gone down from previously 150 to 50, but now costs 100 command power as well. This is going to be a particular nightmare for all you Chinese players out there, because incompetent officers, if I remember correctly, still gives you a negative 70% on command power gain. So China might be struggling for advisors. Before we move on to talking about the new character interface, I just want to go over a few interesting points about the image we originally saw. The first one is we can see now that doctrines have been moved here to research, with each of them having their respective icon on this screen. Something that isn't perhaps immediately recognisable is that a lot of the naval doctrines you could overlap, so that means you could actually do 2 or 3 naval doctrines at the same time, but now that there's only one button assigned to it, I wonder if you can only research one naval doctrine at any given time, which sort of slows down the process for those who are massively investing in their naval doctrines quickly. At the top right, there's 2 buttons to see your generals and admirals. I wonder if this is just ease of accessibility so you can quickly approach them and look who they all are. In Army Command, there's a single button which none of the other tabs have, which I'm guessing here, but if I were to guess, if you click it, it will show you all of your available military tactics. Currently, as it stands in the game, the only way I can think to easily see your tactics is to be directly in a battle with another nation. When you see the defense screen, in the very center of the screen, you'll see a little chess piece which says Tactics List, which is similar to the icon we saw on that tab. It then opens up the list of tactics you can use, and the more doctrines you do, the more tactics you'll unlock. So yeah, I think that's just a much simpler way for you to quickly see which tactics you've unlocked and which you're yet to unlock. At the bottom of each of the tabs, we can see very easily accessible information telling us bonuses, buffs and other aspects of our country that we've unlocked. I think this is really good in terms of very quick player accessible information. If you see in Naval Command at the far right, it tells you how many units you can have in a naval invasion, which typically I'd always forget whether I've researched naval invasion tech or not. So yeah, you just need to look at this screen and it should tell you what you've unlocked, what you've got buffed and what's yet to do. The final part of the Officer Corps screen, which isn't talked about, is what these 3 massive buttons are on each of the tabs, 2 for Air Force Command. It doesn't really go into them, but they look pretty impressive and formidable on the page, so it's up to you to decide what you think they are until they say more. But I do have one theory. For those of you who play EU4, you might recognise this screen as the Great Powers of the World, which tells you which countries are currently doing the best on things like economy and provinces they own and etc, etc. But what's important is at the bottom is the hegemons. Depending on who has an economic, naval or military hegemony will receive massive buffs because they are the greatest power in that respective field. Now I could be completely wrong on this one, but it does kind of look similar to what they look like as hegemonies in EU4. I could imagine that for the Army Command, the central one is who has the biggest military in the world, you could have who has the biggest navy in the world, and each of them, being the best at what they are, receives a minor buff for what they've achieved. Since Hoi 4 struggles to give you a very responsive "you've won," something to keep an eye out to see who is winning the world war in terms of certain factors, this could be another way to judge people's victory. Whether or not this is that, I have no idea, but in terms of a concept, I think that something like hegemonies could work in this context. And lastly, before we move on, has anybody noticed that the agency button is just missing? It's just not here anymore. It's disappeared. The following section describes how there's been a whole host of changes in regards to advisors, spirits and commanders, and they've merged them, perhaps, into a sort of character-like concept. They described how if they wanted to create a national spirit related to having a certain character in your government, it would be entirely unrelated to having an advisor with the same name. They'd just share the look of it, but they'd be completely disconnected systems. This is the same for commanders and advisors. They appear like the same person, but they're just titled the same thing, they're not the same at all. Apparently this has now changed, and they are collectively one character which can have multiple uses as an individual. This takes the format now as advisor promotion. So this new system comes into its own with the introduction of a more connected officer corps. Before, you'd have a list of relatively obscure military offices where you just hire random people for 150 PP and not really think too much about it. You were just looking at the buffs. Now there's a much more dynamic system where you will actually be able to individually promote your generals and field marshals and whatnot to become your military high command. In this image here, we see how Her Hell is going to become an entrenchment specialist because he's got a pretty good ability as an engineer. So as we can see here, it appears that traits are going to be key in determining what kind of military high command you can unlock. And then if you want to get a really good ability within that, so the amount of gains you receive, you need to level them up, with every 2 levels giving a better bonus. We see here that at Specialist Advisor rank 4, you get 0.06 daily experience gain, but if you can get to rank 8, you get 0.1, which is a significant difference. I think this is really going to decide which commanders people are going to use in certain fights. I can just imagine that the Spanish Civil War is going to become right, who do we want to send to the Spanish Civil War to level them up as quickly as possible so we can turn them perhaps into a military high command and get a massive bonus because we ranked them up there. In the same way, I could imagine the Italians do something similar in Ethiopia. Of course, all of this raises a ton of questions about how game balance is going to work because the democratic nations are really not able to participate in these early game experience gain boosts. So maybe they'll have an alternative way of doing things? I guess we'll find out as we go along. The final part of the Dev Diary talks about experience. Paradox describes how moving forward there's going to be a gradual switch from peacetime generation with your advisors and training units through to wartime generation in individual battles. But with the switch that's coming to focus more so on wartime, they will have had to have reduced the amount of XP you gain in battles to make it so that the people who have earlier wars don't get a massive advantage in the early game. They also describe how overall experience is going to be higher, so hopefully that means that certain people won't be soft-locked in their progression as opposed to others, and this is to help mitigate the introduction of the tank designer, which had those pesky army experience costs. The final image of the Dev Diary shows the 3 new Doctrine Research tabs, which have of course been moved to the Officer Corps as we discussed earlier. While overall the doctrine trees look identical, so far as they describe, the big change here now is that research won't happen over time, but is a flat cost in which you purchase them using experience. So the overall look for the game here is that you will no longer be spending research slots having to catch up on doctrines, they can be focused on other things, and if you do want to invest into your doctrines, you're going to have to work for that experience earlier. Personally, I'm not too sure how I feel about having an immediate cost that just goes straight away. I feel like maybe there should be a progression over a few days. I don't know, I could imagine a situation where somebody's able to very quickly spend 300 or 400 army experience and just spam their way down a doctrine. So I'm not sure if there's going to be a cooldown or a timer, but that's just my opinion. I think an immediate response is questionable instead of a slow progression of understanding about wartime tactics. But hey, maybe they purchased the Superior Firepower book from the store for 100 army XP. Okay, that's everything to talk about this week. Pretty short dev diary again, but I think they're just working on the bigger stuff regarding the certain Soviet bear. So let's look forward to that. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope this was informative in some regard and inspired a few interesting ideas. If you've enjoyed, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Bye.